En el dinámico mundo de la enseñanza de inglés, los maestros siempre han sido la guía clave para el desarrollo de los estudiantes. Pero, ¿qué sucede cuando abrazamos el cambio y nos abrimos a nuevas posibilidades? El mundo está evolucionando rápidamente y la educación debe seguir el ritmo de esta transformación. La tecnología se convierte en la herramienta que desbloquea el potencial de cada estudiante, permitiéndoles explorar y aprender de maneras nunca antes imaginadas. Las distancias se reducen y las conexiones se fortalecen. En este contexto tan cambiante, el aula física y el espacio digital se fusionan de manera innovadora, expandiendo las oportunidades de aprendizaje. Pensando en quienes valoran la capacitación y mejora constante de sus clases, SBS Librería Internacional presenta cada año el TDC, un evento académico dirigido exclusivamente a docentes de inglés. Con la participación de destacados speakers nacionales e internacionales, representando renombradas instituciones ligadas al mundo educativo. A todos los maestros que construyen el futuro una lección a la vez, les decimos, bienvenidos al TDC. En el dinámico mundo del
Good afternoon to everyone attending the Teaching Development Conference, TDC Cusco 2024, organized by SBS Librería Internacional and ICPNA Cusco. In this new edition, we meet again through the hybrid format, using tools that allow us to meet with our colleagues connected from all over Peru. On behalf of SBS Librería Internacional and ICPNA Cusco, I would like to thank you all for attending this academic event. We are in continuous improvement of virtual education, and we are trying to balance our reality to enhance both our virtual and face-to-face classes with amazing tools. To continue, we'd like to welcome Ms. Blanca Terrazas, Directora General of ICPNA Cusco, who will now start the proceedings by inaugurating this event. Ladies and gentlemen, Ms. Blanca Terrazas.
Good afternoon, everybody. On behalf of Mrs. Blanca Terrazas, General Director of Instituto Cultural Peruano Norteamericano del Cusco and Special Book Services, it is a great pleasure to welcome you to the 2024 Teaching Development Conference. We are happy to have you here for what promises to be an inspiring and enriching experience. As educators, we understand the profound impact that effective teaching can have on our students' lives. This conference is dedicated to enhancing our skills, sharing innovative practices, and embracing the diverse approaches that define our profession. We are excited to host a remarkable lineup of international speakers who bring a wealth of knowledge and experience from various educational contexts. Throughout the conference, you will have the chance to engage in thought-provoking sessions, interactive workshops, and meaningful discussions. I encourage each of you to participate actively, ask questions, and share your insights. It is through our collective expertise that we can continue to develop as teachers and create a dynamic learning environment for our students. Let us take this opportunity to connect with one another, learn from our distinguished speakers, and celebrate the passion that unites us all as educators. Together, we can inspire our students to reach their full potential and foster a love for learning that lasts a lifetime. I would like to extend my sincere thanks to Ms. Josefa Bonilla, General Manager of SBS Peru, for allowing us to host this important event. I would like to also express my gratitude to our international speakers. Welcome to Cusco and to this event. I'm Andrés Córdoba, Head of SBS in the Southern region, who organized and put this event together. Thank you all for being here, and I look forward to an exciting and productive conference. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Directora Amparo. Now we'd like to mention our organizers for this event, SBS Librería Internacional. SBS has the great opportunity to be in contact with the best publishers in the world, and this makes it possible to bring together in a single event some of the best international specialists representing their publishers and institutions, bringing with them knowledge that has been developed in different parts of the world, and to apply it successfully in our English teaching here in our schools, institutes, universities, cities, and countries. Without further ado, I'd like to invite you to watch the following video with me. Let's go, team.
Durante 28 años, SBS, Librería Internacional, ha sido el pilar de la educación y el aprendizaje de idiomas extranjeros en el Perú. Nuestra destacada trayectoria y firme compromiso nos han permitido establecer alianzas con editoriales de renombre mundial, como Oxford University Press, Pearson, Cambridge, National Geographic Learning, Penguin Random House, Planeta, entre otras. Además de contar con nuestro propio sello, SBS Editorial, estas colaboraciones nos capacitan para ofrecer una selección sin igual de títulos, que abarcan desde textos académicos especializados hasta las últimas novedades literarias. Con 15 librerías en las principales ciudades del país y una plataforma en línea que extiende nuestro alcance a nivel nacional e internacional, no solo proporcionamos contenidos, sino que también brindamos una experiencia personalizada en cada compra. Nuestra oferta incluye una amplia variedad de recursos en enseñanza de idiomas, ciencias sociales, literatura, infantil, negocios, diseñados para estudiantes, docentes y apasionados del conocimiento. Con el programa SBS Más Educación, nos especializamos en la capacitación de docentes de idiomas. Colaboramos con figuras reconocidas en la enseñanza de idiomas para ofrecer formación avanzada en metodologías pedagógicas. Nuestro enfoque no solo mejora la enseñanza de los idiomas, sino que también abre puertas a un mundo de oportunidades. Capacitamos a educadores para que a su vez puedan preparar a sus alumnos para el futuro. Contamos con una variedad de programas, como ELT Training Sessions y el TDC Teaching Development Conference, que abarcan tanto formaciones presenciales como capacitaciones virtuales. En SBS Librería Internacional creemos firmemente que la educación y la cultura son fundamentales para una sociedad próspera. Nos esforzamos por impulsar un cambio positivo y construir un futuro lleno de posibilidades para el Perú y el mundo.
Thank you very much, team. Now I'm going to talk about how certificates of attendance to this event will be issued. If you have not registered for the conference, please do so now. Use the registration link in the comments box or in the video description. Remember to enter your email carefully so that you can receive your certificate without any issues. Very good. Now moving along, I want to thank the Regional English Language Office, RELO, for participating in this event. The Regional English Language Office, RELO, was established in 2006 in the public affairs sector of the U.S. Embassy in Lima, Peru. This was done to support public diplomacy through English language teaching and training in Argentina, Bolivia, Chile, Ecuador, Paraguay, Peru, and Uruguay. It cooperates with ministries of education, binational centers, professional teachers associations, Fulbright cultural exchange programs, Peace Corps, public and private universities, and other higher education institutes. This is in order to build a stronger understanding between the peoples of Andean regions, the southern cone of Latin America, and the United States. The office works through the public affairs sector of the 7 Andean region-based U.S. embassies. This is done to create and implement projects and programs related to English language teaching by providing training, opportunities, expertise, and materials. The Lima office is one of 25 workplaces around the world and is coordinated by the U.S. Department of State, the Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs, and the Office of English Language Programs. On behalf of RELO, I'd like to introduce the first speaker of this event, the renowned consultant Janine Matz, with the topic, From Science to the Classroom, What Linguistics Tell Us About English Language Teaching. Janine did her graduate studies in applied linguistics at the University of Illinois in Chicago, where she also taught Spanish for several years to L2 and heritage language learners. She has been living in Quito, Ecuador for 12 years. where she has taught English at the Universidad de las Americas and the Universidad San Francisco de Quito. She is currently a full-time professor and researcher of linguistics at the Pontificia Universidad Católica del Ecuador, PSE. This is in Quito. She also teaches master-level courses online in several Ecuadorian universities. Her professional experience also includes being editor-in-chief and author of El Tercero de Bachillerato. These English language models were produced for the Ecuadorian Ministry of Education and are currently being used in the last year of secondary school. She is a regular consultant for the United States Peace Corps in Quito and is currently collaborating with RELO Andes and the US Embassy in Peru, producing webinars for English teachers around Latin America. She has participated in several national and international conferences and published articles in academic journals. Her research interests include psycholinguistics, language acquisition, language teaching, bilingualism, sociolinguistics, and pragmatics. In her free time, Janine volunteers with the Fundación Fidal and as the creator and administrator of the Facebook page Ecuadorian Public School English Teachers, where she continues to provide thousands of teachers with a plethora of resources to improve their classroom practices. Welcome to the TDC, Janine. It's a pleasure to have you with us this evening.
Thank you very much, Daniel. Thank you to everyone. Thank you for having me this evening. I really appreciate it. I'm very excited to be here. We're going to get started right away. I just want to let you know ahead of time that here in Ecuador right now, we are suffering from blackouts. So I'm without electricity, but we're doing the best we can here. So I think we're ready to get started with the topic for today. As we can see on the screen, it's called From Science to the Classroom, What Linguistics Tells Us About English Language Teaching. Like Danielle explained to you, I am working right now collaborating with RELO Andes, but my full-time job is at the Pontificia Universidad Católica del Ecuador, where I am a linguistics professor. So let's take a look at what we're going to see today. So we're going to do a brief introduction. Then we're going to look at 40 plus or almost 50 years of SLA research. And by SLA, we mean second language acquisition. Then we will look at applications in the classroom. And then we will take any questions or comments that you may have in this session. So, okay, for our introduction, I want everyone to remember back to a very difficult time in our history, which was the pandemic, which was not too long ago. I know this was a difficult time for all of us around the world, right? When the coronavirus first appeared, what did people do? Let's remember, what did people do? We panicked, right? We were, what's happening? What is this? We don't know it. It's very scary, yes. But we tried to protect ourselves, right? And we looked to doctors and science for answers and solutions. We learned to wear masks, use alcohol on our hands, stay 2 meters apart, etc., right? We looked to science for answers for this, right? What do we do? Okay, we have to act this way. And then when the vaccines were available, we got the Johnson & Johnson, Pfizer, Sinovac, whatever was available to us, right? Because we realized that we need a vaccine to protect ourselves from the coronavirus because science told us that, right? What is my point? That we look to the scientific community for help and guidance in many circumstances. In language teaching, however, we have over 4 decades, almost 5, of linguistic research with important results that for some reason or another, we are still not applying in our foreign language classrooms. What are those reasons? There could be many reasons. Maybe people don't know about this research. Maybe it requires change, and change is difficult for people. Maybe we don't have the resources. Anyway, there are several reasons why we might not be applying this research in our classrooms. But what I want to do today is share with you some of the most important findings from linguistic research about language teaching and how we can apply them in our classroom, okay? So I have lived in Ecuador, in Quito, in the capital, for 12 years. And I have had the opportunity to visit dozens and dozens of English classrooms around the country. And it's an amazing opportunity. And I've been able to observe some things that happen around the country, right? What methodologies or approaches are English teachers often working with in the classroom? And from what I can see, the Ecuadorian reality and the Peruvian reality are very similar. So what I notice in my observations is that many teachers continue to use the grammar translation method, and I'm sure many of you are familiar with this. This was popular 2 centuries ago in the 1800s, right? It was based on translating words and grammar structures from one language to the other, right? So we take a structure from Spanish, for example, we would say, okay, here's the subject, verb, object. Now we translate it into English and vice versa, right? With grammar as being the main focus. We also have a lot of teachers who continue to use the audiolingual method. The audiolingual method was popular over 60 years ago in the 1960s. This was developed in a military school. So it's based on repetition and drills. If I say, for example, this is a pen, repeat. This is a pen. This is a pen, repeat. Pen, 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 right? Okay. It was based on the idea that that language is a habit, right? And we form a habit in a new language. Except the problem with that is that language is not a habit, right? But the audiolingual method treats language as a habit. Okay. So these are a couple of methodologies that we've seen around the country in the context that I've been surrounded by, right? This activity, I'm sure, looks very familiar to a lot of you, this type of activity, right? You can chat with us, put in the chat, have you done these types of activities in your classrooms? Or have you done them as students of English? Remember your English classes as students, right? The typical fill in the blank activity with the correct form of the verb in parentheses in the present continuous, right? And then we have these nice sentences. We have different subjects about Johnny and Steve and Jane and I and you. And then we have the verbs in parentheses, right? And then the students have to conjugate the verb in the present continuous, which is to be, plus the verb in ing, right? Okay, so Johnny is playing, Steve and Jane are eating, etc., etc. Yeah? I'm sure that all of us have done these activities at some point or another, but what might surprise you is that these activities don't actually help with language acquisition. They are completely useless for language acquisition, and we'll see why, okay? If I just follow this formula, I can complete this activity, to be plus ing. But do I need to understand what the sentences say? I don't. I don't need to understand anything at all. I can complete this activity without knowing English at all. I can invent a verb that doesn't exist in English, right? Like, for example, florp, yeah? And I can say, she is florping now. Does that mean anything? No. The word doesn't exist in English, right? But yet we can still complete this activity. And what happens? Teachers see the results of their students. They say, wonderful, my students have 10 out of 10. Perfect score. They can conjugate verbs. Okay, great. And then we try to have a conversation with the students. And we say, what are you doing now? And the teacher and the student stays there thinking, I don't know what to answer, right? So this is the problem with these types of activities. Let me show you what my Spanish classes were like in the United States. I grew up in Chicago. I studied Spanish from when I was 12 years old. I started studying Spanish in school at 12 years old. I had notebooks full of verbs like this. This is how we were taught Spanish in the United States. And I'm talking about the 1990s. So you know more or less how old I am. But this is still the same way that many schools are teaching Spanish in the United States. Can you believe it? Now, in 2024, many schools and universities are still teaching Spanish in this way. Yeah. So we have the verb dormir, for example, it's a stem changer, O to UE, right? It means to sleep in English. And then we have the conjugations. Yo duermo, tú duermes, él, ella, usted duerme, etc., right? I had notebooks full of these verb conjugations, hundreds of them with all of the stem changers and the yo form that's different and this. And it was, notebooks, lots of them. Right? And then we had activities just like the ones we see in English. And here we could see the instructions, right? Llena los espacios con el presente de cada verbo entre paréntesis. And we had to do the same thing. Pedro, okay, this is an ER verb, so I take off the EN, and then I have the root that is COM, and since it's Pedro, it's él, so I need come. Yeah, Pedro come fruta. Do I need to be able to understand these sentences to complete them? No. I don't need to understand the meaning. I don't need to know what this means. I don't need to process the actual Spanish in these sentences, which means that it doesn't help for my acquisition, because in language acquisition, if we don't have the psycholinguistic process of binding, it's called binding, which is connecting form and meaning together, we do not have acquisition. We do not have acquisition. Yeah. And that means that we're spending years teaching the language in the United States, in Ecuador, in Peru, in China, in many places around the world, in a way that does not allow our students to actually learn the language. Let me tell you a personal anecdote. I have a friend who came to visit me here in Quito, maybe about 8 years ago, before the pandemic. He came with his wife, and he is a lawyer, yeah, and he studied university. He studied 10 years of Spanish. And I watched him try to communicate with the Quiteños here in Quito, and he couldn't. And he said to me, "You are a linguist. Tell me why I cannot communicate in Spanish. I got good grades in Spanish, perfect scores. I understood grammar. I was good. Why can't I have a conversation with the Quiteños?" I said, "Because we were taught in a way that doesn't allow us to have a conversation, that only allows us to do these types of activities," right? So that's a big problem. Yeah, okay. I want to compare teaching English as a foreign language to teaching math. For some of you, this may be a trigger, The Pythagorean theorem. Do you remember the Pythagorean theorem? Yeah, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. Okay, the Pythagorean theorem was for a right triangle, right? And the math teacher would say, okay, the value of A is 3, the value of B is 4. Now you find the value of C. So as students, we put the values into the equation, and then we said, okay, C equals 5. Yeah? Okay. Notice how many times we're teaching English the same way as we teach math. In other words, the present perfect in English is we use the auxiliary verb has or have plus the past participle, right? Okay, now apply this formula, right, to these sentences. I have studied. They have traveled. We have eaten. Got it. Perfect. Okay, great. But the problem is that our brains do not work with language in the same way that they work with math. That is the problem. And so when we teach a foreign language like we teach math in a systematic, formulaic way, we end up with students who are able to complete sentences and tell you all of the irregular past participles in alphabetical order, but they cannot communicate in English. And what is our goal as language teachers? I think our goal, all of us, is to have students who can say, "Teacher, guess what? In Cusco, I found some tourists the other day and they couldn't speak Spanish. And I helped them to find the historic center to go on a tour. I helped them because I spoke English to them," right? That's our dream, I think, as language teachers. Not that they can conjugate verbs in alphabetical order. We want them to use the language to communicate, right? So in order to do that, we have the responsibility of teaching them in a way that allows them to communicate. Yeah? Okay. So what's the problem then? We know from psycholinguistics, and you could see this little brain here who's very frustrated, that language is not processed and stored in the brain in the same way that math is. By using these old-fashioned mechanical activities, we are forcing the brain to work with language in ways that are completely unnatural for it. The brain gets very frustrated because it cannot conceptualize of language in this way. Okay? Let's look at this another way. Okay, on the screen right now, I have two pictures of two beautiful cities that are both my home. On the left side, we have a picture of Chicago. Chicago is in the state of Illinois in the United States. That's where I was born, where I grew up 30-something years of my life, where I spent a lot of time. This is my home. This street is a famous street in Chicago called State Street. I don't know if any of you have visited Chicago, but I recommend it. It's a beautiful place. This is State Street, and there's a historic theater there, the Chicago Theater, okay? And on the right side, we have a picture of my other home. If any of you know Ecuador, this is Ecuador. This is the capital. This is Quito. And this street right here specifically is Naciones Unidas, yeah? Both of these streets are very busy streets in these two cities, okay? So let's imagine that we all take a trip to Chicago together. That would be fantastic. Yeah, we all go to Chicago together. And we go to State Street, where this picture is, and we choose a random Chicagoan, yeah, a person from Chicago. And we say, excuse me, sir, ma'am, how do you conjugate drink in the present perfect third person singular? Okay, try this experiment if you have native speaker friends who are not linguists, who are not language teachers, yeah? I tried this experiment with my mom. My mom is monolingual in English. She grew up her whole life in Chicago. She is a retired teacher. She has a master's degree in education. And I tried this with my mother. And my mom said, I can't do that. Can you give me an example? And I said, no, I cannot give you an example. That's the point. You have to answer this without an example. Conjugate the verb. And my mom said, I can't. Yes. The same way, if we switch it to Spanish, right? The same thing will happen. If we go to Cusco, if we go to Lima, if we go to Naciones Unidas in Quito, and we ask the person, disculpe, ¿cómo se conjuga el verbo estudiar en el pluscuamperfecto de subjuntivo tercera persona plural? Ask people in Cusco. Ask people in other parts of Peru. Ask them if they are not language teachers. Yeah, if they are language teachers, they have a different perspective. But if they are doctors, lawyers, if they are native speakers of the language, this is a very difficult question for them. You guys, those of you who learned English as a foreign language, can easily do the question on the left. You can share it in the chat if you want. You can all do that, right? Third person singular of the verb drink in the present perfect is has drunk, right? The Spanish one, maybe a lot of you can do the one in Spanish because you're language teachers, so you've learned more about languages and how they function and their different forms and everything. But the majority of Peruvians, the majority of Ecuadorians, Spaniards, Argentinians, Chileans, Bolivians, whatever, can't do this. Yet, they use the form perfectly. Yeah? What is the pluscuamperfecto de subjuntivo tercera persona plural del verbo estudiar? Hubieran or hubiesen estudiado. Yeah? I'm sure that all of you native speakers of Spanish use that form a la perfección all the time to communicate, right? Si los estudiantes hubieran estudiado, habrían sacado mejores notas or something like that, right? You use that perfectly to communicate. Do you readily know that that is the pluscuamperfecto de subjuntivo tercera persona plural? No. Do you need to know that information to communicate in Spanish? No. right? What is my point by showing you this? Our focus as language teachers is often in the wrong place. Our focus should not be that this is called the present perfect continuous and the third person singular and the auxiliary and the participle and no. Our focus should be, how do I use this stuff, language, to communicate, right? To share ideas. Because in the end, language is the tool for communication, right? Okay. So in other words, according to how our brain works with language, this doesn't help to acquire it. Foreign language teachers are unique in that we are the only ones who help students gain an ability and not knowledge. How is this different? Well, if we consider the different teachers at our institutions, right? Math teachers, science teachers, social studies, whatever other subjects you guys have, right? They are working with students with knowledge. The Pythagorean theorem is knowledge. The periodic table in chemistry is knowledge, right? In the case of Ecuador, we have 24 provinces and their capitals. That's knowledge, right? But we, as foreign language teachers, are working with students to develop an ability. And that ability is to be able to communicate in English, to communicate, to understand and be understood, right? And that's super cool because we are the only ones in our institutions who are working with students to develop an ability. If that's the case, then we cannot teach our subject in the same way that they teach math, science, social studies, philosophy, civics, history, etc., right? Even lengua y literatura, even the Spanish teachers at your institution are different than you as English teachers, yeah? Because the Spanish teachers are dealing with students who already have the linguistic system of Spanish in their brains, right? But in the case of English, they don't. Yeah? Okay. Finishing up with the theoretical and scientific part and starting to move on to the classroom, what have hundreds upon hundreds of studies on second language acquisition taught us? I summarized the findings from dozens of studies in one slide, right? So here we have comprehensible input is essential. What do we mean by comprehensible input? Input is everything we receive in the target language, written or spoken, everything, yeah? Our job is to make the input comprehensible. In other words, we have to make the input easy to be understood by our students, something that they can process. That means simplifying the language, simplifying the morphosyntax, the grammar, using vocabulary that's more in common, right? Short sentences, easy topics that they can manage, things like that, right? Because they're exposed to a lot of English, but we need to refine the English so that their brains can absorb it. Let's consider a metaphor here. We all know what a faucet is, right? A faucet we have in our kitchen. We open the faucet and water comes out, right? So let's imagine that we take a sponge, yeah, and we open our faucet in the kitchen, okay? If we take a sponge and we put it under the faucet and we open the faucet all the way to the maximum power of water, what happens to our sponge? Our sponge tries to absorb the water, but a lot of times the water just splashes all over, right? The sponge cannot absorb it because the pressure is too hard, yeah? On the other hand, if we take our sponge and we open the faucet just a little, yeah, so that a trickle of water will come out, what happens to the sponge? The sponge is able to absorb the water a lot better. It can absorb and absorb. Finally, it reaches a point where it can't absorb any more water, yes, but it can absorb the trickle of water much better than it can absorb a deluge of water, a lot, right? So that's our job, is to refine that water so that it's very fine and is absorbed by the sponge, you see? Yeah, communication is key. Focus on communication. We need to be sure that students are always processing meaning, yeah? Context is crucial, We have to contextualize language, real life contexts, right? Processing instruction helps. In other words, if I tell my students, pay attention to this particular form or this particular word or something, if I guide them through their input that helps them, there can be a silent period. When little children acquire a new language, they are quiet for several months. A little child says his or her first word around the age of 1 year, more or less. But then it takes them a long time to really start producing the language. So there's a silent period for first language acquisition, and it might be a good idea to consider a silent period for second language acquisition too. Allow students to receive the language in comprehensible input, process meaning, think about it, right? Build some implicit linguistic system, and then have them produce. A big mistake that we make is we teach them a new verb form and we say, okay, ya de una, produce, say something, right? Say something in this, using this form. But they just learned it. How is that possible, right? So, okay. Learners must be obligated to process meaning. If we don't have meaning connections in the brain, if the students are not processing what the English language says in every activity, we don't have acquisition happening, period. Yeah? And we have to remember that acquisition is a long and complex process. In the case of native Spanish speakers, guess what? Spanish, of the world's over 7,000 languages, Spanish has one of the most complex verb systems in the world. The verb system in Spanish is extremely complex because if you think about it, we have all these tiempos verbales, right? We have presente, pasado, futuro, and then within all those, we have futuro perfecto, pluscuamperfecto, and then we also have moods. So we have the indicative and the subjunctive. And every subject in Spanish, the ending is different. Yo ayer hablé, tú hablaste, él habló, right? All of those different endings. The Spanish verb system is really complicated, and it takes a Spanish native speaker approximately until the age of 12 years old to fully acquire the Spanish verb system. I'm talking about a little Peruano, a little Ecuatoriano, Boliviano, all born in Spanish-speaking countries. It takes them until approximately 12 years old to fully acquire the whole verb system. Imagine that, 12 years of your life. Right? So acquisition is a very long and complex process, and we can't make students rush through it. Yeah? Okay. Here we get to the practical part. Yeah? The approaches based on second language acquisition theory. This is not all of them. These are a few of them that have been used since the 1980s until modern day. Starting with the natural approach, which was by Krashen and Terrell. If you don't know Dr. Stephen Krashen, Dr. Tracy Terrell, these are two names that are very important in language acquisition theory. This was based on the natural approach, how we naturally acquire language, right? This started in the 1980s. Then in the late 1980s, beginning of the 1990s, we started seeing a communicative approach. Yeah, we've had the communicative approach for over 30 years at this point. And we're still not all applying a communicative approach in language teaching, right? Task-based learning, I'm sure you are familiar with a lot of these, if not all of them. Project-based learning, content and language integrated learning, which is where we learn English through different subjects. We learn English through history, English through math, etc. Yeah, all of these are based on second language acquisition theory. They are approaches to language teaching that are grounded in science. And now we're back to the idea of science, right? Coronavirus, we had research and we did things about the research. Linguistics, we have research about language teaching. These are approaches that are based on that research, okay? Okay, now I'm going to present to you guys some tips or some guidelines to be able to create your own activities within a communicative approach, right? Nowadays, we don't say so much the communicative approach, we say a communicative approach because approaches like TPR, total physical response, project-based learning, task-based learning, these are actually all communicative in nature. So sometimes you will hear a communicative approach instead of the communicative approach. But we're going to learn how to create input activities so that you can actually create these for your students. I have tried using ChatGPT to create structured input activities, and it is not good at it. Not yet, anyway. Maybe other AI platforms work better with input activities, but ChatGPT, for one, cannot do it well. So if you have the techniques to be able to do them yourselves, it's better, right? So how do we deal with input activities? Okay, what do we need to do? We need to provide students with more real contextualized language, yeah? Make them do something with the input. You'll see what I mean in a few minutes when I give you some examples. Respect the silent period. Instead of automatically making them produce the new structure right away in the first class, let them absorb the new structure first, yeah? And we do grammar instruction through induction. Maybe some of you are familiar with what this means, grammar instruction through induction. Basically, we present a lot of examples, but contextualized real life examples, yeah? And then we say to the students, what's happening here? What's happening with the grammar? What do you notice? And instead of you giving the rule to the students, it's the reverse. The students tell you the rule about the form. And that's awesome because it empowers them. They're like, haha, I know the rule. My teacher didn't need to tell me. I figured it out myself, which is great. Yeah. Okay. So there are 6 main types of input activities that we can use. Binary options, matching, ordering and ranking, supplying information, selecting alternatives, and surveys. And I'm going to give you guys an example of each one so that you have an idea of how they work. Okay. Starting with binary options, and I'm sorry about the layout of these slides. I downloaded them from Canva, and they sometimes get a little bit messed up. But anyway, okay, binary means 2. Yeah, so 2 options. Students have to respond to their input, right? So we can have them respond with 2 options: true, false, yes, no, agree, disagree, US, Peru, etc. Okay. Here I give you guys the target structure, which is the comparatives. Yeah. And I give them instructions. We all have different opinions. Boom. Immediately, I set a context. We're going to be talking about opinions, right? Let's see what the class thinks about these affirmations. Respond with agree or disagree. And then I have different options here, different sentences. What you guys can see in the sentences is that the target structure is highlighted in bold print. This is part of what we mentioned as processing instruction. I want my students to focus on the target structure. So I do that by underlining it, putting it in bold print, putting it in a different color, something, right? Resaltarlo, something, like highlighting something, so they can see this is what I need to focus on, yeah? And then I have different sentences that they can have their opinion on. English is more difficult than Spanish, for example. Yeah, they can decide, do I agree, do I disagree? By them responding, agree, disagree, I am ensuring that the students are processing meaning, because they cannot say their opinion unless they understood the sentence. Right? So that way I know that they're responding something that they've already processed the meaning of. Yeah? Okay, so this is an example with binary options. Matching. Here, it's just like we know matching. It's 2 columns, A and B, right? We have where we match the items. Here, I decided to work with the target structure of the simple past regular ED form in English. Your teacher was very busy last weekend. Again, automatically I set a real life context for them. We're going to talk about the teacher. Match the items in column A with the correct one in column B. Yeah, and you can write true or false sentences, and you can ask them, are these all true? Are they false? And let me tell you, these types of activities that are about the teacher, students absolutely love. They love them, because they love the chisme about the teacher, the gossip, right? Whether the students are 5 years old or they're 25 years old, they love these types of activities about their teacher. So they're already motivated to do it because they want to know about their teacher, right? So you can see here in the 2 columns that the target structure, the ED, is again in bold print. So my students focus on that, yeah? And you can also see that the level of language that I'm using in this activity is appropriate for students who are just learning the simple past in English. These are not complex sentences. I do not use modal verbs, second conditional, super advanced vocabulary. No, I'm working at the level of the student, right? That's very important because I need to provide them with input that is comprehensible for them, you see? And this is something that is comprehensible. So they match it. And in order to match the 2 columns, they need to process meaning because they cannot match column A and column B unless they know what column A says and what column B says. You see? Okay. Let's continue. Here's another example of a type of input activity, which is ordering and ranking. Ordering and ranking refers to putting the items in chronological order or ranking items first, second, third, etc. Here I'm using the target structure imperatives, and I chose the context of a very typical Ecuadorian dish that is often eaten during Holy Week that is called fanesca. I don't know if any of you have tried fanesca. Personally, I think it's delicious. I love it. But I say here, your Canadian friend wants to try making fanesca. Put these steps in order so that he can prepare it. And so you see, once again, the target structure is in bold print, right? Boil, wash, peel, add, put, add, etc. And then they have to process the meaning of each of the sentences and put them in the order in which you prepare fanesca. With ordering and ranking, it's very important to remember that there has to be only one possible order. Because a lot of times we see these types of activities with daily routines, and it doesn't always work because sometimes you can do your homework before you eat dinner, you can do your homework after you eat dinner. So we have to be careful that the order is, there's only one possibility. Okay? Yeah, again, language that's simple enough for our students to understand, they're processing meaning, they're focusing on the target structure, etc. Okay. Another example of an input activity is this one that is supplying information. Ojo, be careful here, because supplying information can be information like colors, names, places, anything except the target structure. This is very important to keep in mind because supplying information is fill in the blank, but we can't fill in the blank with the verb conjugated in the target structure because they don't know how to do that yet, right? They don't know the target structure yet. They haven't received it yet. So we can't ask them to produce it already. They have to receive the target structure already conjugated or formed correctly. So here I'm working with superlatives. Imagine you are giving recommendations to tourists about your city. Complete the sentences with your opinion. So we have, for example, the most delicious restaurant, the nicest neighborhood, the rainiest month of the year, the most fun holiday, the most famous person from my city is. So they're filling in the blanks with things that they already know, not new conjugations in English, right? Things they already know. So they can say what they think the most delicious restaurant is, the rainiest month of the year, etc. Yeah. And then they can share their opinions. But they're not producing the target structure themselves. They're receiving the target structure and completing it, responding to it somehow. Okay? Yeah. So this would be the example of supplying information. Okay. Selecting alternatives. This is multiple choice. But again, we have to be careful. It's not about choosing the verb that is conjugated correctly. No, we can't do that because they're just receiving the new structure, right? So here we can see that the target structure is zero conditional. And I set the context. We all have habits. For each of these situations, choose the option that you usually do. Okay, So for situation number 1, when I have a headache, so in the first part, I have when plus simple present, right? And then in all the 4 options, I also have simple present, which is the structure of the 0 conditional, yeah? If I forget to do my homework, okay, so I can ask my students to do this in different ways. It depends on your reality in your classroom, right? If you have classrooms, like in the Ecuadorian public school system, where there are like 50 students, 60 students in a classroom, maybe you want them to do this in small groups, to discuss their answers in small groups. If you have a classroom that's more manageable because you have 25 students or something, maybe you can do this as a poll. Okay, you say to your class, okay, when I have a headache, how many people say A, I take medicine right away? I take medicine right away. Notice how when I read the activity out loud to my students, I also emphasize the target structure with my voice. That's also helping them to focus on that, to say, my teacher wants me to learn this from this activity, right? And so they can choose A, B, C, or D, etc. Yeah? Okay, so that's another example of a type of input activity called selecting alternatives. Notice that for all of these input activities, we have not asked the students to produce the target structure ever. They don't. They can't. Because the job of these input activities is for them to receive the target structure in a context where they're processing meaning. So they're connecting form, in this case, 0 conditional, present, yeah, with meaning. And when we have form connected to meaning in their brains, we have binding, and that's when we have acquisition. So that's why these types of activities are so important, yeah? Here's an example with vocabulary, because we don't always teach grammar. Sometimes we teach vocabulary, right? And this is an example specifically for little kids. So maybe children who are just starting to learn English, 6 years old, 7 years old, right? A survey is their opinion. So we can use smiley faces. We can use a Likert scale, for example, strongly agree, neutral, disagree, strongly disagree, depending on the context, depending on the type of survey, depending on the age of the students, right? So let's imagine that we're teaching fruits and vegetables to our students, and we want their opinion. And we say, do you like these fruits and vegetables? Draw, smiley face, straight face, or sad face, depending, or question mark if they've never seen these or eaten these before. And we have each one of the fruits and vegetables, strawberries, cherries, oranges, lettuce, broccoli, etc. And they respond with a face. That means that they're processing meaning. They have to understand what the word means so that they can react to it with their own opinion, right? We can do a survey of agree to disagree, a scale of agree to disagree about, for example, public policy or something, but for university students, right? We have to make sure that the topic is relevant to the age that we're teaching, obviously, not only their English level, but also the age of the students. We can't ask children who are 8 years old about government things because they don't know about the government, right? So we have to make sure that the content is always appropriate also for our students, right? So you've seen in each one of these input activities that I've given to you as examples that every one of them requires the students to process meaning, to think about what the language says, to respond to it, right? And I'm going to go back for a moment so that I can show you how the induction part works, grammar instruction through induction. Okay, like for example, if I'm teaching simple past and I finish all of these great input activities, I talk about what the Simpsons family did in their last vacation. I talk about what Justin Bieber did last year, whatever's relevant for our students, right? And then I say, students, what have you noticed in all of these activities? What have you noticed? And the students will tell you, teacher, verb, ed, 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 ed. Okay, good, ed, yes. And when are we talking about? Now? No, teacher. Tomorrow? No, teacher. When? Teacher, in the past. Okay, good. So what's the rule in English? And then the students will say, Teacher, we have to put ED on the verbs to talk about past in English. And then the teacher says, great. And now some of you will say, no, but what about the irregular verbs? And what about the negative? And what about the interrogative? And what about all of that's coming? All of that is coming. All of that will come with time, with more input, with more of these types of activities where their brains can absorb how the language works, right? In real life. But they come up with the rule. They're the ones who come up with the rule. You see? Okay. So coming to the end of this so that we can allow for time for questions, please, if you have your questions, go ahead and share them in the chat. Thank you for your comments. Tell us what you're thinking. If you are inspired to use these activities, if you've used input activities before, tell us. Share with us, please, in the chat. I'm going to conclude with what's next in the field of linguistics related to language teaching. We're examining very closely the role of the first language in foreign language teaching. In the 1990s, beginning of the 2000s, we started saying no L1 in the classroom, no native language in the classroom, only the second language, only the target language. But now we're reconsidering that notion because we've realized that sometimes a little bit of the target language is good. Yeah. Thank you, Geraldine, for your comment about the strategies. Thank you. So we think maybe there's a little bit of that's good. So we're developing this idea of translanguaging, where we're using just the L1, but just for something very, very, very specific, right? Like a very strategic use of the L1. I remember when I was taught Spanish, we had such a difficult time with pretérito imperfecto. It was horrible. Pretérito hablé, imperfecto hablaba. We could not understand the distinction. We couldn't understand. And our teacher only spoke to us in Spanish, right? But if she had taken just 30 seconds to say in English, guys, look, hablé y hablaba, it's like in English. We have the same aspect differentiation. In English, we say, I spoke to my mom yesterday, right? Or I was talking to my mom when my brother arrived, right? Or I used to talk to my mom every Sunday. We have the same distinction that they have in Spanish. If she had only taken those 30 seconds to make that bridge for us between our L1 and our L2, it would have helped us a lot to build our interlanguage between our L1 and our L2, right? So now we're re-examining that role. We're also looking at acquisition by means of GSSR, which is guided self-selected reading. This is something that Stephen Krashen and Benico Mason have worked a lot on. Children's stories are one of the best ways to acquire a language because in children's stories, language is simplified. We are able to understand language in children's stories. It's simplified. They have pictures. It helps us. And we have really underestimated the value of children's stories in language acquisition. So now we're looking at guided self-selected reading. The teacher provides readings that are appropriate for the students, and the students do those readings accordingly, right? They choose from a set of readings which one they're interested in, and they acquire language through reading. Okay, to finish up in case anyone has questions or anything, I want to conclude with the moral of the story of the past 45 minutes, yeah? Going back to the idea of the coronavirus, just as doctors have the responsibility of paying attention to new research findings in their field, so do we as language teachers. We have the same responsibility to know what's happening in the science of language teaching and to apply those very valuable findings to our classroom practice, right? And these input activities that I gave you guys as examples is a good place to start. And that's exactly what we're not doing yet, right? Provide your students with lots of comprehensible input. Outside of the classroom, give them more input to work with. Not worksheets, real language, yeah? And I want to finish today with this quote from one of my role models, my personal role models. This is Dr. Maya Angelou. I don't know if any of you have heard that name before. She's no longer living. She passed away some years ago. She was a poet. She's most known for being a poet. One of her famous poems was Phenomenal Woman. She also writes stories. She wrote stories. I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, those types of things. She was a teacher, an activist, yeah? And she has this quote that applies here, I think. She said, "Do the best you can until you know better. Then, when you know better, do better." So we as language teachers, we do the best we can. Given the circumstances, some of us don't have much technology here in this part of the world, right? Some of us are working without books, without materials. Some of us are working with classes that are 50 students. Some of us only have 3 hours of English a week or 2 hours of English a week. We do the best we can with all of those circumstances, right? But now that we know better about how we should teach language, we have the responsibility as language teachers to do better. For ourselves, yes, but mostly for our students. Because like I mentioned at the beginning, I think all of our goals as language teachers is to have our students be able to use the language, to come back to you 20 years from now and say, "Teacher, you know what? The way you taught me made me be able to communicate in English, and now I use English on a daily basis in my job." Or, "Teacher, you know what? This past weekend, I helped lost tourists in the city find their way." Or, "You know what, teacher? Last weekend, I was gaming. I was playing video games online, and I was able to communicate with people from China, from Canada, from Azerbaijan in English because it's a lingua franca." That's what we want, right? We don't want our students to just memorize verbs. We want them to communicate in English. And if we do these things based on science, we're going to achieve that for our students. Yeah. That's all I have for you today. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you very much, Cusco, for your invitation. Daniel and everybody with the team, thank you for having me today. I really appreciate it. Thank you very much. I hope you've enjoyed the session.
Thank you very much, Janine. Thank you for your presentation, for your time, and for sharing your knowledge with us. Okay, now just before we begin the second half of our event, we would like to extend our heartfelt thanks to ICPNA Cusco, our co-organizers. Their support has been invaluable in bringing this event to life. ICPNA Cusco is a binational center dedicated to fostering mutual understanding between Peru and the United States of America. We are part of the American Spaces Network and ABLA, the Association of Binational Centers in Latin America. The mission of the Peruvian North American Cultural Institute in Cusco as a binational institute is to promote mutual understanding between Peru and the United States through the development of cultural and educational programs, including English language instruction, thereby contributing to the growth of the region. ICPNA Cusco works in collaboration with the press and culture sections of the U.S. Embassy in Peru. To learn more about the mission and vision of ICPNA Cusco, let's watch the following video.
El Instituto Cultural Peruano Norteamericano del Cusco es un centro binacional, educativo y cultural, miembro de la Asociación de Centros Binacionales de Latinoamérica. Forma parte de la red de American Spaces, una red mundial de aliados estratégicos que promueven el desarrollo de sus comunidades a través de la enseñanza del idioma inglés, actividades culturales y educativas, fortaleciendo las relaciones bilaterales con los Estados Unidos. Nuestra galería brinda espacios culturales para los artistas locales, nacionales y extranjeros. La historia de nuestra institución se remonta a julio de 1956, cuando un grupo de prestigiosos intelectuales y profesionales cusqueños se reunieron para suscribir el acta de fundación del Instituto Cultural Peruano Norteamericano del Cusco. El ICPNA Cusco ofrece espacios acogedores e inspiradores donde nuestros visitantes y alumnos pueden conectarse y aprender sobre los Estados Unidos de Norteamérica a través de nuestros modernos servicios de biblioteca, asesoría educativa, aprendizaje del idioma inglés y programas culturales. Reforzamos y creamos proyectos audaces y creativos que promueven los objetivos de nuestra misión, de acuerdo con el principio fundamental de la democracia, que significa defender el derecho de los ciudadanos al libre acceso a la información precisa, oportuna y apropiada sobre los Estados Unidos y el mundo, su historia, su cultura, su sociedad y sus valores. El ICPNA Cusco, como espacio americano prioritario y estratégicamente importante, ha asumido el compromiso de seguir desarrollando y fomentando la comunicación, colaboración y emprendimiento a través de una tecnología de punta, consolidando el desarrollo de nuestra comunidad y promoviendo la construcción de un mundo con justicia y paz.
Language is more than words on a page. It's how we express ourselves, how we share ideas. Learning English opens the door to new opportunities, new perspectives, new people.
I'm sorry, that's rude.
No worries. Every tiny step forward is part of something bigger, something better. The moments when you get it right. Moments when it takes all you've got. Moments when you connect. When you dream. When you grow.
Hi.
Hi. When you find the words.
I'm nervous, but it's like, you know.
Thank you, team. Now let me introduce our next speaker of this event, the renowned consultant Claudia Lopez, with the topic, Humanizing Technology to Inspire and Motivate Learners. Claudia Lopez has been involved in the educational sector for over 30 years. She's a psychologist, holds a specialization in psychopedagogy, has an MBA in marketing, and is a certified media and information literacy trainer. A strong believer in continuous professional development, her main interests are active methodologies, diversity and inclusion, and the science of learning. As well as presenting at international conferences, Claudia has also written and developed and delivered teacher training workshops for teachers in the Americas and Europe. Currently, she is finishing her postgraduate studies in neuroscience, education, and child development, and works as a senior professional development services consultant for Oxford University Press. Welcome to the TDC, Claudia.
Thank you so much, Daniel. Thanks a lot. It's a great pleasure to be here today. And, well, hi, everyone from Peru. Thank you all for attending this session. I'm very happy to be here today. And I'm talking to you from the beautiful city of Rio de Janeiro in Brazil. It's an honor to talk to teachers from the amazing Cusco and many other Peruvian cities. I do love your beautiful country. And I would like to thank Oxford University Press and SBS for this opportunity. Today, we are talking about a very special topic, humanizing technology to inspire and motivate learners. So I'm going to share my presentation with you. And now we have it. And I'm going to use two devices so that I can interact with you in the chat box, okay? And this topic we are talking about today, for me, it's a very special topic because we all know that in today's rapidly evolving educational landscape, teachers face many challenges in fostering meaningful connections with our students, especially when they are in virtual settings. So this session was especially designed to empower teachers to create positive and inclusive environments where technology is used as a tool and students do feel valued, emotionally supported, and motivated to learn. So I hope you enjoy the session and feel free to use the chat box to communicate. Let's take a look at what we are going to address today. So in this session, we are going to analyze the world we live in, talk a bit about lifelong and life-wide learning, and also talk about innovation and technology. At the end of the presentation, I'm going to share some ideas with you so that you can implement in your classes. And I would like to invite you to take a look at this picture. Let's take a look at it. Beautiful, isn't it? Beautiful and also fragile. I like this picture very much because when I look at it, I can see the world we live in. And okay, it is constantly evolving, but it is so fragile that we need to take care of it. And if we analyze it a bit deeper, we can see that we are facing liquid times, as the amazing Zygmunt Bauman said. He argued that in such a world, people are increasingly disconnected from each other and also from traditional values and beliefs. This creates a sense of fragmentation and dislocation. But I truly believe in the human being. I believe in the capacity we have to build incredible things. And as a teacher, I believe in our ability to positively impact minds and hearts. There is a delay here. It seems to have a delay, and the chat box disappeared for me. So I'm going to turn off this device because it's not working. And we are going to continue with this talk, analyzing a little bit this fragile world we live in. We can call it a BAMI world, B-A-M-I. Many people before 2019 would say that we lived before 2019, in a VUCA world, VUCA, a world totally disconnected, uncertain, chaotic, ambiguous. But after the pandemic, we came to this situation, a fragile world, also called a Benny world. Brittle, anxious, and anxiety is everywhere, unfortunately. We can see in our classes children, teenagers, adults, families, all very anxious in a totally brittle world, which is also nonlinear. We cannot plan, we cannot forecast, we cannot see what is going to happen in 2, 3, 4, 5 years. In the past, we used to plan for 10 years' time. But now it is very hard to do that because of this non-linearity. And you must agree that it's a very incomprehensible world, full of problems and questions to be answered. A world that does not sleep. People don't sleep well. We are losing focus all the time. And this incomprehensible world challenges our brains every day in the search for more sustainable paths. So it's not easy to live in such a world. Taking this into consideration, I would like to use words from one of my favorite bands, Jamiroquai. And these words say, virtual insanity is what we are living in. And I agree with this song. If you take a look at this picture, let's analyze it together. This picture was created with artificial intelligence. It was generated with a prompt that I created. And this picture shows what happens in many cities on a daily basis. People walking down the streets without looking at each other. People using their devices continuously. It seems that mobiles are attached to our bodies 24 hours per day, 7 days a week. And this is totally insane. Sometimes people cross streets looking at the mobile screen. They don't look at each other. And in such a crazy world, such a new and difficult world for many of us, we need to talk about different generations in order to understand the students we have in class. Tell me, what generation do you belong to? Take a look at this nice image, also created with artificial intelligence, and tell me, what generation do you belong to? Are you a baby boomer? A baby boomer who was born between 1945 and 1964? Or are you a member of Generation X, the X generation, my generation? People who were born between 1965 and 1979. Are you an X? Or a Y, born between 1980 and 1994, the famous millennials. Many of you are millennials, I know that. And many of our students and some of you are Zs. The famous Z generation, Generation Z, the TikTokers, the ones who never sleep with the mobiles in their hands. And they were born between 1995 and 2009. I like this generation very much. They have a lot to share with us. They are very creative, curious. I do love talking to them, teaching them, interacting with them. And last but not least at all, we have the alphas. And I'm very curious about the alphas because they bring some fresh points of view to our classrooms, to our lives. The alphas were born starting in 2010 till now. During the pandemic, they said that they would call the babies who were born during and after the pandemic coronials, but thank God they decided not to do that. It would be very weird. And if we analyze the picture, we can see that different people doing different things in the same place, with different ways of dressing up, of reacting, of living. I like very much this idea of having different microcosms. In our classes, if you take a look, each student brings a different perspective of the world. They have their own worlds, their own little worlds. Sometimes their world looks like this image inside this crystal ball. This is very beautiful. This is very nice. Having different perspectives in the same classroom. Different knowledges, different points of view. This is what enriches our classes. This is what makes people want to connect, to engage. This is what makes the world turn. And when we have in class different generations, we have a variety of possibilities. And there are some common things common features between the alphas, the Zs, and the millennials. All of them, and I know that you are going to agree with me, all of them are 24 hours, 7 days a week online. All of them deal very well with this globalized world. But unfortunately, almost everybody is anxious and very impatient. When people come to me and say, well, all my students are multitaskers, they can do many things at the same time, I usually say, well, are they really multitaskers? Are you sure? Do you know why? Because the human being, the human brain, can only process one thing per time. So the human brain is not a multitasker. What happens to the Zs and the millennials and the alphas is that they are very quickly in switching tasks. They are excellent switchers. They are very fast. So this gives us the idea that people are multitasking. But in fact, this is not true. It's funny. I'm not a multitasker at all. I cannot do two things at the same time. I have to focus on one and then the other one. You know why? Because I'm too slow in switching. And it's interesting because with so many possibilities, so many tools, so many digital tools that we can use in class to promote different classes and to enhance their learning, we can see that active learning makes total sense. It's totally meaningful for them. They can interact, they can express their ideas, but sometimes this situation happens. And now I ask you, is this situation familiar for you? Does it happen in your classes? I know that the answer is unfortunately yes. And this happens to many, many, many teachers in many different parts of the world because students sometimes cannot connect. You can see this boy is there alone by himself while the others are engaging, connecting, sharing ideas, sharing experiences. Sometimes they cannot connect, they cannot engage. And nobody said that everything was going to be easy for us. Sometimes teaching is something very hard. Sometimes we have in class students who really need our support. And in order to truly connect with our students and create classes that are relevant and engaging, we need to know them. And how can we do that? Through observations, needs analysis activities, and being open to listen to them. When we do that, we can obtain valuable information. So, what do they think? How do they feel? What are their preferences? What influences them? What are their goals and their pains? What activities do they prefer in class? And it's not a matter of pleasing them all the time. I was talking to a very good friend of mine who is an excellent teacher the other day. She's about 46 years old. And she was talking to me and she told me, Claudio, when I studied English, when I was a teenager, we had nothing. We only had books and sometimes activity books that were very, very, very expensive. Many students could not afford them and would buy them secondhand or borrow from friends. And maybe we would have a dictionary. And we had lots of curiosity and we were eager to learn. And she said, one of my mottos was, where there is a will, there is a way. She faced many difficulties to learn, and she always said to herself, when there is a will, there is a way. And we were talking about the past and comparing the past to the present. And she said, it is very difficult to teach my students today because it seems that they don't connect, they don't engage. And we have a variety, a world of possibilities. Yes, the world is different. Nobody said that it would be easy for us to teach our students. And as I said before, it's not a matter of getting to know them better to please them. No. We use sometimes pedagogical digital devices, digital tools to help them learn and to foster connection and engagement, because we are dealing with different generations, with different mindsets, and different talents. And those different talents can be very beneficial in a class. I love this picture that I also created using AI because it shows that the new generations, they have different talents. They are curious, they are eager to learn. Sometimes it seems that they are hardwired, their brains are hardwired in a different way. And I like very, very much to observe, to analyze, to connect to them, because they teach us a lot. They teach us a lot. And this training culture from the past does not work anymore. In the past, we would kind of train students. I remember that about 20 years ago, I delivered a session called Let's Grammar Up in a big hotel here in Brazil. And we talked about the 4 skills, the communicative approach, and the name of the session, the title was Let's Grammar Up, because we were talking about grammar as something that could be dynamic, engaging, and involving. And I remember that we performed lots of different activities in class, with many games that I prepared. It was a very hands-on session. And many of the activities aimed to develop soft skills, the so-called soft skills that were being introduced in the market at that time. And now, when I look back, I can see that we were not developing soft skills. We were developing human skills. We were preparing at that time our students for the future. And we still do that. When we are in class, for example, and we ask them to delve into a project, and they start negotiating with each other, brainstorming, using their creativity, using digital tools to create new things, to create their presentation. When they start to think critically about the topic and everything that is involved, wow, we are not developing soft skills, we are developing human skills, because we want to have our students well prepared to make a better world. And human skills have surpassed hard skills as a priority for the modern learner. When they come to our language institutes or schools, they don't want to learn verbs, prepositions, nouns. No, they want to learn how to communicate, how to change what is not working. And I love this picture and this image on the right-hand side of your screen. Let's take a look at it together. Take a look, first of all, at this beautiful girl with this smile and this beautiful sense of accomplishment. In her mind, she's telling herself that she can do anything in this world because she tried and she succeeded. And her brain is flooded with dopamine because everything is working really well. So if we analyze the image on the right-hand side, we can see that we have 3 possible zones for our students to be in. In the middle, we have the comfort zone. And this is the one I really don't like. I don't like it because in the comfort zone, nothing happens. The comfort zone is an area that students stay there and they don't develop anything. We have a nice saying there on top of the screen. A smooth sea never made a skilled sailor. And this is true. We need to challenge our students. We need to challenge our students and to help them discovering new possibilities. But there is another situation. When students are in the panic zone, oh, this is very sad. This is very hard. Because in the panic zone, nobody learns. When you feel stressed, when you are not connected, when you are not focused, when you are in panic, you cannot learn. Nobody learns in this situation. So where should we be? Where should we help our students to stay and learn effectively? In the learning zone. And to be in the learning zone, we need to understand their preferences, the way they see the world, and we also need to understand the brain in the digital era. Wow, what a beautiful image. A brain full of connections, full of possibilities, full of preferences, full of ideas, and with a world to discover. You see, lots of things happening. And the brain in the digital era suffers a lot because there are so many things to capture our attention that there is a syndrome happening, unfortunately, called the stolen focus. I'm going to ask you some questions. When you are at home, okay, during the weekends, trying to relax, and you decide to, for example, watch a film, watch a movie, can you sit down and relax for 2 hours and focus on the movie without getting your mobile to check if you have any messages? Do you check your Instagram account? Do you remember that you have to do something on Monday, and do you take notes? Or do you just lose the focus and start browsing everything in the social nets? This happens to everybody. We are facing this problem. We are suffering from this syndrome called the stolen focus because there are many things to grab our attention at the same time. 24 hours per day, 7 days per week. So as teachers, we need to have lots of flexibility. We need to have flexibility in order to be able to talk to our students, catch their attentions, promote interesting things in class, and also talk to global minds. Our students connect to many different places in the world. They use social media. They are very sensitive to opinions. So this new generation brings a lot of different perspectives to the classroom, including this one. Do you suffer from FOMO? Do you know what FOMO is? Do you suffer from FOMO, FOMO, with new trends and digital tools? Any ideas about what FOMO is? I'm going to tell you. Maybe all of you know what FOMO is. FOMO stands for fear of missing out. And I can tell you that about 6 months ago, I was really suffering from FOMO because I was preparing many sessions on artificial intelligence and also innovation in education. And the amount of new technologies, new tools, new apps, new possibilities for the classroom, they were emerging so quickly and in such a great number that I couldn't follow everything. And I started to feel anxious because whenever I had to deliver a session, I would ask myself, Am I including all the possibilities? Am I including the latest tools that my fellow teachers can use? So this anxiety was almost all the time inside my brain, because this fear of missing something out is something very, very bad. And our students sometimes face that, related to information, to their friends' lives, their friends' new ideas, what they post in TikTok, what they post in Instagram. The world is suffering from FOMO. And there is something very positive that we can say about the use of technology in the class. And when we talk about humanizing technology in the educational environment, we need to consider that we have the power as teachers to help our students overcoming problems, reaching new levels of learning and development, and also having good moments, feeling happy. I usually say that when a student goes to an English class, this student is not just going to a class. This student is going to a moment equivalent to a therapy session. Because when students are learning, happy, interacting with their colleagues in class, learning something new, creating new connections in their brains, they receive many shots of dopamine during the whole class, during the whole month, during the whole year. And this beautiful picture shows us that when we succeed in something, for example, a quiz. I love playing quizzes with my students. And imagine that you're having a quiz in class. You're having a quiz in class, and that student, wow, gets everything right. And you can see in his or her face that, wow, that student is happy with that sense of accomplishment because the answers are right, dopamine is flooding his brain, and he will never forget that moment. When you promote tasks and students succeed, dopamine is there, making them feel happy. Dopamine is a neurochemical responsible for happiness, making people feel good. And that student, those students who are succeeding, they feel good and they want to have that back and again and again and again. So you see, the power of dopamine in the classroom creates a trigger, like a loop. Okay, I succeeded. I want to feel that again. I'm going to do my best to get everything right and succeed and be happy. This is empowering learners. This is giving your students the power to go further from the very beginning. When we empower our learners, we are talking about lifelong learning and life-wide learning. When we talk about empowering our students, we are talking about learning not only inside the classroom and not only now. When we talk about lifelong learning, we are talking about learning that takes place across a learner's life. When we talk about life-wide learning, we are talking about the learning that takes place in all sorts of environments during a learner's life. It can be formal or informal. It can be inside or outside the school. So it's something like this picture. You can learn in class, you can learn beyond class, and you can learn throughout your life. So this is very nice, and this is totally related to innovation. Because if we change the traditional way of learning and we promote something totally innovative, we give a chance to our students to learn better, more efficiently, more effectively, and in a different way. So let's not be afraid of new technologies. Let's embrace them as our friends. But there is a point I would like to address when we talk about embracing new technologies. We cannot use digital tools or digital apps or new possibilities just for the sake of using them. Just because they are cool, just because the students would like to use them. We should use them with a pedagogic intention. This is very important. A pedagogical intention, a clear one, is necessary all the way through. So let's not be afraid of new technologies. Let's not be afraid of what is going to happen in the next years. And I have here some sentences that I would like to analyze with you. I would like to know what you think about the future. And I have 4 statements here. Let's analyze them together. I'm going to read them. And each of you, please think if you consider those statements to be true or false. The next 10 years will bring more change than the previous 100 years. Is it true or false? 10 years with more change than the previous 100. What do you think? Okay? Keep your answer and now let's go to the next one. Humans will not be entirely replaced by AI, but humans with AI may well replace other humans without AI. I guess that this can be true, yeah. Sorry. Humans with AI may replace those without AI. It makes sense. What about the next one? Human-only attributes become invaluable, and they are the ticket to the future. Yeah, human-only attributes, well, there are some things that only humans can do. Machines cannot. So if I have those attributes, they're going to be invaluable. They may be the ticket for the future. It makes sense. And let's be architects. Let's be architects of the future. Let's be architects, not victims of the future. So what do you think? True or false? What do you think? If you answered that they are all true, then you were right. They're all true, and these statements were taken from a talk delivered by the amazing Gerd Leonhard. Gerd Leonhard is a futurist, and I am a great fan of his work. And he said that 95% of what we are, machines are not. And I agree entirely with him. You know why? Because HI will never be replaced by AI. Human intelligence won't be replaced by artificial intelligence. And Brian said something very positive that just appeared here in my screen. I'm going to get my second device so that I can read that. The pace of technological, social, and environmental change is accelerating so rapidly that the next decade could indeed see more transformation than the entire past century. Thank you so much, Brian, because this is exactly what good Leonhard says. And I agree entirely with that. And when we talk about the good future of education, we talk about humanizing technology so that our students can feel comfortable in class, connect to each other, engage, and learn. So I would like to invite you to search the web afterwards, maybe tomorrow, and watch this amazing talk by Gerd Leonhard entitled The Good Future of Education. I'm going to, at the end of the session, show you a QR code in which you are going to get some suggestions, some tools. There is a list of tools, like a bibliography. And you're going to receive the link for his website, okay? So if you have the time and the interest, take a look at this talk, because this is kind of a watershed. You can say it's a watershed for those who like to learn more about innovation in education. So let's embrace a growth mindset. Let's broaden our horizons. Let's go for that. And let's not be afraid. We need to be enthusiastic about any new technologies we use in class. Because if us teachers, if we are not enthusiastic, learners will think, why should I be? If we are not, why should they be? So let's embrace this growth mindset. And let's think about the benefits that will come from that. Learner agency, our students as protagonists, equity, inclusion in our classes, interdisciplinary learning, global citizenship and empathy being developed, the teacher acting as a mediator, as a mentor, students being able to think, discover, perform, and solve problems, and real language taking place, real communication taking place, and critical thinking being developed. So there are many, many, many benefits that we have. But how can we do that? How can we have this insight? How can we do that? 10 seconds for you to think, and I will try to open the chat. This is funny and weird at the same time. Chat box does not open for me. I don't know why. Okay. Sometimes this happens. So how can we do that? I have some ideas that I would like to share with you. Tools that we may use to connect with our students, help them engaging with the tasks and with each other, and ways to use technology in the class to help us creating a positive environment and helping our students to learn. There are some useful tools that we can use, and the first one I'm going to talk about, I know that all of you use, all of you know, which is Canva, the design office for non-designers, but there's a reason why I put it here. I know that you all use it, but this is also a very good way to help them creating, our students, material for their projects. When I put it here, it's not for the teacher to use, but students to create an account and create their masterpieces here. And the masterpieces they create for their projects need to be organized. So I like very much to organize students' productions, and they do that. They open accounts and they create their own books with Bulb. Bulb is a portfolio creator. And this portfolio creator enables students to get their posters, pictures, maybe drawings, texts, recordings, videos, and put everything in just one place. When they put everything in just one place, something magical happens. You know what is this pure magic? They can see their learning curve, ascending learning curve. They can see that they started in a way, and then the next year they are improving and improving and improving. The writings are really more fluent, more accurate. The videos they record, wow, they're speaking. The way they use the words, their intonation, the flow. So when they organize their production inside a portfolio, this is amazing, not only for themselves, but also for their families. So let's use Bulb, for example, as a portfolio creator. They can also use Canva to produce their masterpieces. And I like very much podcasts. And many students love podcasting too. Many students love podcasting. And these students who like podcasting, they can use Anchor by Spotify. This is one of the easiest ways to create professional recordings. They can interview each other, they can interview other people, they can talk, they can record, and they can put sounds, effects, music at the beginning, at the end, and they can upload their production to Spotify and create inside Spotify playlists. So you can have for that group a playlist, or students can have for themselves a playlist with their production. So this is amazing. We can do amazing things with technology, and an app like Anchor can help us doing that. And also ClariSketch. I love this app. With ClariSketch, our students can take pictures. With their fingers, they can draw over the picture, and they can also record their voice over. At the end, they're going to have a very humanized explanation of something. For example, we can create in a class, for example, a restaurant, a fictional restaurant, and they are going to design the menus, and then they're going to role play a night at that restaurant, choosing what they're going to eat and drink. And they can take a picture of what they produced with their hands. They can go through the menu, for example, and record their voices. Then they can share or insert into their portfolios. So as you can see, these are very nice ways of humanizing our classes and the use of technology, because they are going to use their creativity to develop new things. Another app that I really like using is this one, 7Taps. 7Taps is amazing. They can create cards, 7 cards, including video, including audio, including pictures, texts, and they can share with the others. So their projects can be inserted here. And it has total connection with microlearning. So you as a teacher can also create cards with something you want to explain about grammar, or with some instructions, or with information about something. And they use their mobiles, they tap 7 times, and they can see the 7 screens. Many nice possibilities. Also a nice possibility when we want to share ideas, to discuss something in class. And KiriPod is another app that you can use. With KiriPod, students can select a topic, discuss, and send their impressions and their opinions without being kind of judged. This is perfect for shy students. They can send their opinions, and we can vote, we can address the opinions, we can analyze without exposing our students. This can be very helpful when we have shy students in class. Some people say that a picture is worth 1,000 words, right? And creating images is something that is very helpful and positive. Our students can do that. They can create images to illustrate their projects and the tasks they complete. And there are many possibilities nowadays. I created almost all the images from this presentation with Copilot, the one on the right-hand side. But you also have GenCraft, FreePic, Adobe Firefly. Easy to use, very user-friendly, and ways of creating new things and humanizing the use of technology in class. Because people are very visual, human beings are very visual. And when you have nice visuals in class, things are really different. So let's try them with our students. And last but not least, let's talk about some other AI tools that can help us planning our classes. Sometimes we are not into the mood and we want to create something, but the right idea does not come. So these plethora of AI-powered tools can help us creating nice classes. There are some suggestions here that are going to be in the list that you are going to access later on. And we will be able to share these nice tools that we can use with a pedagogical purpose in our classes. The last one I'm going to show you is one of my favorites. It's this one, Future Me. With Future Me, you can send emails to yourself in the future. You can choose if you are going to send you the email this month, 6 months, in 1 year, in 10 years, or you can choose the date, the specific date. This is amazing because the students can write about resolutions, they can establish goals that they want to reach, and after the time they establish it, the period of time, they can check their achievements. This can be very positive, and you can practice with your students this idea of designing goals, planning for the future, and planning for success. I like this very, very much. And if you haven't tried with your students yet, feel free to use that this week. Future Me is the name, it's free. All the possibilities I showed you, all the ideas are free, okay? Free apps and free websites. And I'm not sponsored by any of them, okay? And it's interesting to see that in this world, the analog and the digital, they exist together. And they should exist together, because this blend, this variety, this flexible approach we can use in class is very important. We cannot rely just on technology. We should rely on different things, and we should reward our students. We should reward them, because dopamine will flood their brains, and they will feel happy, and they will want more. So when you use gamification techniques in class, gamification strategies, for example, awarding e-badges for the bookworm student, or for the student who could develop the most creative projects, or for that one who is the king of the podcast. When you create those badges, when you create leaderboards, when you award e-certificates, you are using gamification strategies. And your students, wow, they receive this dopamine flush in their brains, and they want to connect even more and more and more and more. So we are reaching the end of this session, and I would like to analyze some conclusions about the use of technology in class and how to humanize this use. And I truly believe that technology has many benefits when used well. And the best technology that you can use, the best technology that you can afford, is that one that is easy, that you can control, that you understand how to use, and that your students will benefit from. Technology allows for lifelong and life-wide learning in different learning spaces. And motivation comes from autonomy, relatedness, and also from competence. So when we have this variety of possibilities with our students in the class, they learn more, they feel part of something bigger, and life and learning, well, happen in the best way. I would like to share with you this QR code. This is a very precious QR code, because here you can find our excellent focus papers. When you scan this code, you are taken from our professional development page, Oxford University Press professional development page, and there you are going to see, you're going to find papers such as this one on humanizing technology, and this amazing one on using technology to motivate learners. So feel free to scan this code and find our masterpieces. I would also like to share with you another QR code. And in this QR code, you are going to find also this address that I showed you before to obtain the focus papers. So you can scan this one, and you are going to answer a very short questionnaire. When you finish that, you're going to receive in your email box a list with 40 innovative tools. It's a handout with 40 innovative tools that I prepared for you, especially for you, with all my love. This will surely help you designing effective and engaging classes and addressing technology in a very humanized way with your students. Okay, so I hope you have scanned it. And last but not least at all, I would like to share this saying from Le Brown, this quote. And Le Brown said that to achieve something that you have never achieved before, you must become someone that you have never been before. So let's dare to change. Let's dare to be different people. Let's dare to innovate and to reach new possibilities, to reach new patterns of excellence, to engage our students and to have them learning in their best way. I love to say that teachers, and I am a very proud teacher. I can tell you that I'm really proud to be a teacher. And teachers are like water. Do you know why we are like water? We are like waterfalls, real waterfalls. Do you know why? Well, this is because sometimes everything is calm, like a river. Everything is flowing very calmly. And then we face a big challenge. And teachers find their way to overcome the problems, overcome the challenges, making beautiful landscape like this one, creating a beautiful landscape, creating energy, beauty, and having a positive impact on people, on students. So we are real waterfalls. And I would like to finish this session with a huge thank you for all the Peruvian teachers and other teachers from different countries who attended this session. Thanks a lot for listening to us, for listening to our ideas, and a huge thank you to Oxford University Press and SBS for the opportunity. It was great talking to you. I don't know if we have any questions, if the questions are going to come on screen now, but yeah, we do have. So let's address them. So Veronica asked, what advice do you have for teachers who are new to using technology in their lessons? Oh, Veronica, this is an excellent question. Thank you for asking that. A nice way is joining teachers groups, virtual teachers groups that share ideas. You have many of them in Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp. So share ideas in those groups and also with your colleagues in the schools you teach. Also, participating in events like this one is a good way of obtaining more information and sharing ideas. And another possibility, Veronica, is take a look. I'm going to put it here again. If you haven't had a chance to scan, if you didn't have the chance to scan it now. And there you're going to find our website. There you are going to find many papers related to technology and also some PD modules. They are kind of mini courses that you can take, and we'll tell you more about things that you can use, possibilities. Attend events. Browse the internet. Possibilities are many. There are many free conferences. There are many books that you can download, read online, and share ideas. If you have a colleague at the school you teach or the language institute you teach, what about learning together? Peer learning, okay? Connecting, sharing ideas. Let's do that. When we create communities of teachers, when we belong to a community, we are stronger and we learn more. So that's my advice. Thank you, Veronica, for the question. Oh, and don't forget to fill in a form that you have so that you can receive your certification at the end of this conference, okay? SBS asked me to remind you about that you should complete in order to receive your certification. Jaime, I don't know if I'm pronouncing correctly your name. Sorry if I made a mistake. How can we ensure that all students have equal access to technology? This is very hard, Jaime, because we cannot guarantee, we cannot ensure, unfortunately, because we have different situations in different places. For example, access to technology in Brazil, it depends on the region you are, depends on where you are. And I believe that, I know Peru quite well, I believe that you face the same problem in Peru. Depending on the area, on the place, on the region you are, internet is not good. You don't have good quality internet. Students cannot access computers, digital apps, for example, tablets or mobiles. So we can learn about many different things. We can learn about the world. We can learn English with simple technologies like a pen and a notebook. So technologies, all the devices you can use in order to enable you learning. So digital technologies, sometimes the students won't have them, unfortunately. There is a very good study called The Digital Divide. Browse, look for that. It's an Oxford paper called The Digital Divide. It's a research. Read that. I'm sure that you're going to get an overview of what is happening in the world related to that. And the digital divide, unfortunately, is big. Jaime, thank you for addressing that, because this is very serious and we need public involvement. We need public laws, public regulations to enable our students to reach this stage. Thank you, Jaime. Romina, how are you doing? How can teachers use technology to create a supportive classroom environment? First, connecting to students, getting to know them better and addressing their preferences, addressing their needs, addressing things that they are curious to learn more about, bringing real life to the classroom. When you bring real life to the classroom, you can create a supportive classroom environment and your students will engage. So Romina, thank you for your question. And we are coming to the end of the session. I hope you have enjoyed that. And I hope that this was a good time for you, a nice time, a pleasant time. And I hope to see you again very soon. So enjoy TDC tomorrow for those who will be in Cusco. And it was a great pleasure. Now, Daniel, over to you.
Claudia, thank you for your presentation and for sharing your wealth of knowledge with us. It was very interesting and very informative. Claudia Lopez from Oxford. Oxford University Press is a department of the University of Oxford, which shares the mission to further excellence in research, scholarship, and education by publishing worldwide. More and more people are choosing to learn English. When they do, they become part of an international community of English language learners, and Oxford are proud to be at the heart of this community. Their learning materials are trusted by millions of teachers, educational institutes, parents, and learners worldwide. This means that through teaching, learners are on their own terms. They make progress and they achieve their goals. Together, we are moving English language learning forward. So now we've reached the end of the TDC Cusco 2024 virtual session. We want to thank all the speakers, consultants, and the institutes who have participated this evening, and especially the international community of English teachers who have been connected with the sole objective of expanding our knowledge and developing our educational work. It's also important to thank the ICPNA and SBS teams. Again, we remind you that to obtain the certificates of attendance, you must be registered. If you still haven't registered, please do so now. Please remember that you're all invited to the presential session tomorrow, Saturday the 26th at 8 a.m. Finally, thank you all for your attendance and participation. We all look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Have a nice evening and goodbye.